here's our findings. Access to polling units, we still observed that there were issues with the Braille. In fact, what they presented was laughable, sincerely, because that was not the Braille we know of and we expected them to present. In terms of access, I'm going to just speak in summary, and my colleague will give a little bit more detail. In terms of access, it was almost near to zero, because we saw that polling units were presented over and across gutters. And some of them that they tried to present what looks like access would have taken a long time for any persons with disability. Incidentally, Grace, who is on a wheelchair, could not access most of those polling units.
We observed that the route, that's the road leading to the areas where most of the polling units were located, were inaccessible for persons with disabilities. We observed that there were neither ramps nor handrail for use by PWDs outside the voting locations. We observed that it was difficult for voters with disabilities to enter the polling unit and vote. This was largely due to barriers like the corridors and steps, the internal layout that made it difficult for voters with disabilities to participate in accreditation and voting. In some instances, the polling officials claimed that all persons with physical disabilities that came to vote were carried and lifted by the assistant presiding officers before they could be accredited and allowed to vote. Polling unit materials. We observed that the Braille ballot guide was designed in a way that was impossible for blind voters to use effectively. We observed that while the ballot boxes was placed on flat surfaces for easy reach in most polling units, the height of the placement in the other PUs was not suitable for voters with disabilities, especially those who use the wheelchair and those who use the roller blades. The Form EC40H was not available to collect data of voters with disabilities who voted on election day. At most polling units, the INEC Form EC30 EPWDs, that's the election day written instruction, was not pasted for use by voters with hearing impairment. And like my colleague mentioned, magnifying glasses were not seen in polling units except one. On election day procedures, at most of the polling units, persons with disabilities were not given priority queue or priority voting. It is important to state that significant progress was achieved. Okay, I'm going to skip this one.
Let's go to it.
Yes, okay, so I'll skip to the recommendations. Part of our recommendations to the Independent National Electoral Commission, INEC. INEC should categorize the Braille ballot guide, the magnifying glasses, the election day written instruction as a sensitive material to ensure timely and effective deployment for all elections. INEC should strengthen training of regular and ad hoc staff to effectively administer accessible election day materials and accommodation for voters with disabilities. INEC should ensure that voting cubicles are designed to enable voters with disabilities to cast their ballot confidentially, as well as ensure ballot boxes are placed in areas that allow voters with disabilities to vote independently. Lastly, INEC should continue to engage and consult with organizations of persons with disabilities and with the disability community to identify areas to be improved for more inclusive election processes, especially in the production of the Braille ballot guide. In conclusion, it is evident that Nigerians with disabilities want to participate in electoral and political processes. However, accessibility challenges, stigma, and stereotypes continue to persist and undermine PWD's abilities to participate in electoral and political activities. While INEC has taken great strides to improve its priority voting policy and implement voting accommodations, the gaps that continue to undermine the processes are too evident and visible. The joint organizations commend INEC for its commitment. We are also disheartened by the lack of prioritization given to voting materials for voters with disabilities.